Okay, I will post this on my Twitter. Just bear with me for a second. Good afternoon, everybody. If you're watching this FORSEA Dialogue live series on democratic struggles from Southeast Asia. I am Zani, co-founder and the host of this dialogue program. We cover a lot of contemporary issues that are common across different societies, especially societies that are going through wars and internal conflicts, or that have survived, atrocity crimes such as genocide that countries like post-Khmer Rouge, Cambodia has been reeling from. And it is my the distinct pleasure to have Farina, who's a doctoral candidate at the University of Massachusetts on genocide studies, and also equally important, she is the principal deputy director, running the operations and programs and also fundraising as well as educational initiatives with the Genocide Documentation Center of Cambodia. DC CAN is the principal pillar of the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, providing documentation, documentary evidence to all parties, prosecution, defense, as well as civil parties. And Farina is also a prolific writer, speaker, and she has spoken in different international conferences, and she has also written a number of very important works on the persecution of Cham Muslim minority people. She is herself Cham. Welcome, Farina. I was just reading your colleague, Yok Chan's essay that was published back in April of 2021, a little over a year ago, in the Voice of America, where he talked about transitional justice, and also the judicial means of securing transitional justice, as necessary but not enough, to restore what has been taken away from Cambodian people. You suffer within a span of almost 4 years the loss of 2 million Cambodian people of different ethnic and religious background, including Cham minorities, as well as Vietnamese, Chinese, and Buddhist and others. But there are 5 million people who survived the Cambodian genocide, right? And so, as I understand it, you're leading an effort to provide a form of restorative justice in in terms of the mental health needs of the survivors, that survived the genocide 40 years ago, and they're still reeling from the psychological legacy post, the PTSD and others. Can you tell us about the concept behind mental health support as an integral component of transitional justice?
Yes, so first, thank you very much, Zani, for having me and also for a very nice introduction. Yes, thank you also for the question. So when we talk about transitional justice in Cambodia, it has been over 40 years since the collapse of the Khmer Rouge in 1979. And the main question is what is transitional justice and how can we achieve it? Because usually transitional justice is a process. So Cambodia has done a lot since 1979. If you recall back, we used to have a revolutionary tribunal, and we had done a lot of things related to memorialization, education, and recently justice again. But this one, it's more like we call extraordinary chambers in the court of Cambodia. It is both Cambodian and international effort, especially with the participation of the United Nations. So the court has just handed down a life sentence to former Khmer Rouge senior leader. He is the only surviving Khmer Rouge senior leader, Khieu Samphan, the former head of state. So this means that we have been working on justice, which is to ensure that Khmer Rouge senior leader and those most responsible are put on trial, and justice is done for the victim. And also education. It is very important to really educate younger generation about the Khmer Rouge period. And so we collaborated with the Ministry of Education in order to incorporate this text into national curriculum since 2009. So it is now mandatory for school children from grade 9 to 12 to learn about Khmer Rouge history at school. But what is next for survivors? Because when we thought of 2 million people who passed away during the Khmer Rouge period, we also need to think about those who survived. So about 5 million people left or surviving, and they are about 50 years or above. So they are facing a lot of challenges. So because of trauma that they suffered during the Khmer Rouge period, for example, because of the Khmer Rouge policy, like forced evacuation, starvation, separation, execution, and also forced marriage or gender or sexual violence under the Khmer Rouge period. So those acts or crimes kind of affected or damaged, or devastated both mental and physical health of Khmer Rouge survivors. That's why it is very important to think about group or Khmer Rouge survivor in general, but we need to highlight why, survivors, because they are victims, but also at the same time, they lack of education. They are poor because of economics disadvantages, and also because of like disability, and because of their existing health condition, mental and physical health. So, but then the main question is about mental health, as you mentioned earlier, and as we have been researching, and we are conducting nationwide survey in order to understand how the Khmer Rouge period affected them mentally, and how this led to physical health issue. So we see a connection between mental and physical health. That's why it is very important to address, to understand, what constitute or what are the symptoms, and how can we address them. So we conducted a nationwide survey by meeting with about 32,000 people or survivors. We are using or working with volunteers we call Cambo Corps. About 1,000 of them. We recruited volunteers because they are the one who go back to their family, interview their family, their parents and their neighbors, and collect all this survey for us, and including our staff, about 37 staff who are supervising them. So we work together in order to collect all this data information in order to understand better or to conduct a more extensive research on this issue. So when we conduct research on the Khmer Rouge, we try to listen to their story. What are the most memorable experience for survivors, and what are the impact or the health condition. So we assess their health condition at the same time. And so we learn a lot, and all this data will be beneficial for this project and also for future project or initiative, because we also learn about, their economic condition, about other issue, how to deal with the past, and also how to improve their community or their family. So which means this data can also impact their community health, community development project as well. So in terms of mental health, so we learned that among 32,000 survivors, mental health disease or issue is number 4. So we found at least 10 common diseases that are facing survivors. The first one is hypertension. The second one is gastrointestinal disorder. The third is malaria. And the fourth one is mental illness. And the fifth one is heart disease. And then followed by other 5 diseases. But these 5 common diseases are kind of stand on the top, like top 5. So when we talk or ask them about what is mental health, and then what are the symptoms, they mention a lot about their memory disorder or something that affect their memory in recalling their story, and also talking about nightmare. So at least 26% of the 32,000 survivors that we met mentioned about that they still suffer from nightmares, and also other symptoms that kind of constitute what is called mental illness. So that's why we are working with both local and international groups in order to find the way how to address this issue. So the first, after we have all this data, we also reach out to the international team at Palo Alto University and Stanford University, who are specialized in clinical psychology and mental and public health, in order to produce a brochure that can inform both mental and physical health. And we also are working with local partners like private clinic and village doctor, the doctor who are based in the local area, and also with the Informal Survivor Association and local authority, kind of in order to work together in order to form a network that can also distribute this brochure when it is finalized.
Yeah, as I was listening to, what you were describing, the mental health issues and the, the legacy of or psychological impact that the Khmer Rouge survivors continue to live. I mean, obviously, it is an extremely vast area of need that Cambodia needs, both financial and other, the professional support from around the world, not just your principal funder, USAID, because we're talking about 5 million survivors, right? But you are reaching 32,000. And of course, that is a gigantic number of population that DC camp is serving, but still there is a massive need that Cambodia, is dealing with. One of the things that I noticed in my conversation with some of the survivors of civil war and genocide in, say, places like Bosnia, or the literature I read on, say, Nazi, the occupied Europe. Say, for instance, like people, the Holocaust survivors who are in their late 80s or 70s, late 70s, if they were children at the time, they display, the fairly common the psychological symptoms. Say, for instance, like some of the people who survived the, Auschwitz or other concentration camps, when they, even like eating, like when they eat, they have developed this habit of saving a little bit, just in case that, they have to run, right? Because they now live a post-Nazi period, but their mental and physical habits were formed during these extremely inhumane period in their lives, right? And also like in in places like Bosnia, you would find people who say they were separated from their parents at the age of 8 or 9. Then like only 4 or 5 years later after the war, they reunited with their fathers who stayed on in Bosnia in camps, if their fathers survived. And they did not remember or recognize their father's face, right? And so there's, the serious the blockage of memory. So you talk about, memory problems. And also like in York's article, he mentioned that, education, one of the major goals of genocide education that you were involved in developing and also promoting is to inculcate empathy, right? So education is usually seen as a rational intellectual process and never really connects with the development of compassion. Can you talk about this connection between, the genocide education that DC Camp promotes and the different types of oral history projects you develop, and how that contribute to the emergence of empathy, because empathy is often seen as a necessary preventative element from future atrocity crimes, particularly genocide.
Yes, that is a very important point to kind of draw a connection between education and empathy. This lie in philosophy of teaching. So usually when you talk about educating younger generation about the past, we need to think about what we actually want out of education. So, and what kind of design should be developed in order to promote that kind of objective. So the objective of genocide education in Cambodia is to promote tolerance and forgiveness, and to prevent the atrocity or violence from recurrence. And so we kind of develop this into our design to make sure that it contain or instill, like a kind of empathy among younger generation, and also among teachers, because it's very important to note that when we talk about teacher, they are also survivors. Most of them are survivors. Some are younger generation. So they live through the period, and then some of them are also former Khmer Rouge cadre themselves. So that's why it is very important to kind of to make it more inclusive, and also to be more kind of empathetic, like to promote this concept. But at the same time, we also need to think about critical thinking, that we need to study the fact and then what happened, and to question, not to just listen and then follow, but to really explore the truth, like the multiple truth. So it is a challenge. I know that in order to balance this, but what we see is because in our guidebook, we produce textbook, a reference book that is now included in the social studies textbook of the Ministry of Education. I mean, some chapters. And we also have our own teacher guidebooks that we work with the Ministry of Education in order to guide teachers through. And of course, they are independent in order to make their lesson plan more creative. But then since you have all these guys, like for them to kind of learn or to follow or create, to be creative. But it is there because we also draw or include other skills, like interview skill, listen to oral history, to their parent story, all of those, and then also a role play skill, like kind of we have different elements in that as well. So that, like it's a way for them not only to study in the classroom, but they can also learn from survivor story. And, like they can digest all this information with the guidance from the teachers, because the class is more student-centered approach. And the teachers have been trained. About 3,000 teachers of history, geography, Khmer study, and civic morality, the 4 subjects, have been trained in this curriculum. And we also conduct follow-up training and in smaller groups from the national, provincial, and to local or commune teachers. And we continue to maintain this kind of relationship with them. And we also include informal education in this process. It is very important to kind of focus on informal education as well, because some of the questions might not be answered, not all of them are answered in the classroom, but it will be left out and then can be also continue in the community. So that's why we kind of create some kind of public forum which bring together student, teacher, and parents together, and so that they can kind of enter into dialogue and conversation and can discuss all this more openly. So that's why, you know, like with this approach and multi activities, various activities all together, we can see, you know, like a connection or the impact of how to embrace this concept and to promote empathy among youth or younger generation. So that's why, you know, like when they learn the history from both sides, from the victim side or from the perpetrators of former Khmer Rouge to cadre, so they kind of can digest and see through like why they joined the revolution and why they, you know, like commit that kind of crimes of violence. And at the same time, for former Khmer Rouge cadre, they can also express, you know, like their story and their, you know, like perspective, like, you know, like and engage, but not sometimes they don't need to confront each other, but at least when you hear from one side and then switch to the other side, you can, you know, like kind of have the student learn from both sides, not at the same time, sometimes in different times. And at some points, you can also bring them together. We can also invite the former Khmer Rouge Guard to share their story, or that can be a good example of how to increase empathy or instill empathies in younger generation. But as I said, at the same time, encourage them to questioning like why they do that, and then if they were or discard during that time, what would they do, to have them really reflect and then kind of have them, you know, like think, you know, like a solution, a better solution, like whether they're gonna do the same thing or they're gonna do different thing.
Yeah, I was, you know, a couple of months ago, I was traveling to Long Bang, you know, Peace Center, and the, you know, actually York took me there. So we spent quite a bit of time, you know, discussing with some of the, essentially, you know, some of the people that contributed to the Khmer Rouge atrocities as teenagers. As you know very well, a lot of Khmer Rouge killers, torturers were teenagers, right? And they are now in their 60s, you know, the late 50s, whatnot. And also there are a new generation of the children from the perpetrators' families along the Thai-Khmer border, which was the last military stronghold for Pol Pot and Khmer Rouge leaders. And I could sense the, you know, the psychological unease within the families. You know, parents did not want to talk about what they did. These were perpetrators. But children who went to university learn about Khmer Rouge atrocities from, say, universities in Phnom Penh or Siem Reap. They started to ask questions. And so, you know, there was some, I could imagine, like, you know, rather difficult the moments within families where you discover that your own, you know, beloved parents contributed to the genocide and other crimes, right? And so So you talk about perpetrators, and then particularly in all genocidal society, with the exception of, let's just say, Germany, right? Because most the victims were either perished or migrated to other countries, like across the world, Israel included, USA. The survivors and the former perpetrators did not have to live together, right? But in countries like say your own Cambodia or Bosnia, where like you found yourself living alongside former perpetrators who your parents or grandparents recognize on the streets or on a farm or in shops, right? What kind of the psychological issues arise when you are forced to live with those who torture or like kill your members of the family?
Well, in this case, like it is difficult for them, like because they have to confront, which means because they live together in some villages, and so in some way it also relieve trauma. But if you ask, like what kind of forgiveness, or whether they can forgive the wrongdoers or the former perpetrators who direct crimes or commit the killing against their families, then like we have to think about the culture, Cambodian culture. Cambodia, the majority of Cambodian people follow Buddhism, but we have some people who follow Islam, practice Islam, or observe other religion like Christianity. So usually, like some people just stay silent. They won't do anything to the wrongdoer, which means they don't take any revenge. Even though a short moment of revenge killing took place in 1979, but only a few months. But later on, like Cambodian people thought or looked to religion as a way in order to heal or to forgive all of those, like, so they just stay silent. And then some would observe, like whether if the wrongdoers do something good, if they turn to do things better, then they would feel relief, at least, even though they won't go forward and say, "Oh, I'm sorry," or "I forgive you." So rarely happen in this situation. But we would say action better speak than words, like, because if the wrongdoers or kind of do something better or good in the society, in the community, so it would help a lot in terms of healing or reconciliation in this context. So this is why it is important to continue to document the story, the kind of individual story from survivors. So we embrace them all as survivors. 5 million, which embrace all victims and also former perpetrators, and continue to educate younger generation about this, and create a dialogue between younger generation and older generation about this period, because it's important for younger generation to kind of think about and kind of learn from what happened and try to avoid that. And also important to look into their health condition, both mental and physical health, in order to kind of bring them together, and also that something we care about them, like, because if you talk about reparation, nothing has been kind of provided to survivors yet. So this is a timing that because they are aging, this generation will be over if we take it for granted. And then our effort is to not only to meet only these 32,000 people, but more than that, because we aim for 5 million. But the question is about, like time, resources, and also commitment. So, but then our objective is kind of to impact all these 5 million survivors in the long run. So at this stage, we met this number, but we continue to document. That's why we encourage, you know, like, because 5 million is a big number. And so, you know, like, it needs a lot of effort in order to kind of reach that number. And if we don't do it now, it will be too late. And so it is very important that we work together, you know, like, in order to realize this concept or objective, because this is the only model, like the first one that has been developed in order to impact or benefit survivors after in post-conflict society. If you look at, and then also something that is funded or supported by international community like USAID, and also thanks to USAID for this support. And we also open this to other community or organization that want to contribute and involve in this process or this momentum.
Yeah, you know, in the overview article that York published, he talked about, you know, his own experience of a disabled sister who had suffered differently but never articulated. And you know, York said that we're referring to the DC Cam executive director, York Cham. And he talked about how embarrassed he felt that he did not even know that his own, you know, sister suffer in ways that he did not ever imagine. And also he, you know, stressed the point that you know, the Holocaust survivors received reparation, right? That was like world headlines, and you know, at the time, to the tune of several $billions, right, from the Swiss banks, you know, that deposited Nazi gold teeth and other valuable items. But you know, we're talking about 2 million Cambodian survivors, sorry, 5 million survivors, and you know, never been compensated. In other words, never been provided reparations. But in the case of the Holocaust survivors, the mental health support was you know, included as part of the financial reparations, right? And so we're still looking at a huge gap, you know, what you have received from, say, United States government, USAID, and what Cambodian survivors, you know, 5 million need. And so there is still a long way to go. But, you know, what you're doing is taking the very first and a very foundational step. And so that's very commendable. What I want to pick up on here is you mentioned, you know, a lot of survivors and their families in Cambodia turning to different religions and religious practices, you know, like that. Like from a Buddhist perspective, we don't have the notion of forgiveness, unlike the Christians, right? You cannot simply confess and be forgiven, right? Because the Cambodia, as a majority Buddhist country, people believe in this notion of karma, you know, that you always reap the consequences of your action, good or bad. And so in that sense, you know, the Buddhism, the Buddhist belief in karma may come into conflict with the idea of, you know, speaking the memories of the past and also processing it with the perpetrators or families, right? Also for Islam, you know, you've got different faith that believes in Allah's judgment, right? And everything is between believer and Allah. You know, Christians have this confession and the overt process of forgiving and seeking forgiveness. And so, how do you square this, you know, various religious doctrines that different Cambodian communities practice and believe in, and with the modern psychology? I understand You've got the psychologists from Switzerland, overseeing the project, and then also you have psychologists and counselors from Stanford University in California. So how do you find compatible ways to incorporate or integrate very different religious and science or modern psychological approaches in your provision of mental health support?
Yes, so this is quite fascinating, because this is the brochure that a draft brochure. Let me show you. Sorry, that's it's not.
Yeah, send me the PDF file.
Yes,
I will.
I will share. We will share with you. So it's interesting, the Colin Cimmerian from Palo Alto University, that he has been here.
You mean at Stanford?
At Palo Alto University, and Dr. Lisa Brown from Stanford University. So for our fellow from Palo Alto University, he came here for a month. But before that, we worked with him, over exchange a lot of email. And so, but he was on the ground for 1 month, and we sent him to different places, and especially to the Phi Center. You visited one already in An Luang. So we have a Phi Provincial Center, Documentation Center in An Luang, Prey Veng, Ta Kau, Kampong Cham, and Tabong Khmom. So we conducted what we call Public Health Message Development Forum with about over 100 survivors who want to go for health checkup. So the question is, we want to know why they want to go for health checkup and why health checkup is important. So we produced this brochure, and it embraced also the religious concept. We have some kind of, modern and traditional or religious way together in order to, distribute and educate people about health checkup or public health. So here, we got a quote from Pope Francis that health, in addition to being an individual good, is also a public good. A healthy society is one that takes care of everyone's health. And we also have a quote from Buddha: to keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. And we also have a quote from Islam, from Muhammad, that there are two blessings which many people do not appreciate: health and leisure. So which mean, taking into consideration about local context, especially culture, that we also need to have some kind of religious aspect in that. And at the same time, we also present the brochure. In the brochure, we have the information about health checkup, about the common disease that they face, and what to do if there is no doctor around in case of emergency. So this can be a resource for them in order to address what we call mental and physical health issue. And the other thing is we practice meditation or relaxation, which is to us can be a similar way to Buddhist practice, right? But in Islam, if you look into prayer, we also have this kind of concept, you focus, you meditate during your prayer. And the same thing with Christianity, that we kind of embrace all of this in order to make sure that it is more localized. It is touching and also apply to local context. So and then we practice this in 5 occasions already in terms of meditation in order to address mental health. So we continue to listen to the story, and this is a good kind of an effective way, as we observe for many years, not only within this time period, but even when we started since 1995. So we learned that story collection or carefully listening to the story is really helpful, or really helps. And then also, health education session that we will also be working closely with religious survivors and practice meditation, and also continue to kind of encourage them to go for health checkup. Because, you know, like a lot of people talk about the relationship between mental and physical health, especially when they have health checkup, so it clear up their mind. They no longer feel the you know, all the anxiety that, oh, maybe I have this disease or that disease, but then if nothing's, you know, like happen, then they kind of, they feel a big relief. And if anything happen, like if they have any kind of disease, so they can prevent on time, otherwise it's too late. So that's why we focus on prevention, same way with genocide education. So it's important that we need to focus more on prevention before that happen. So at least we kind of, we commit to that, you know, like, and so we can prevent it on time. And if not, at least we have all this in place in order to kind of confront or address whatever happened. So
yeah, you know, I was looking at the pictures of the different you know, mental health discussion meetings that you conducted across you know, different parts of Cambodia, and what struck me is the idea of mental health messaging, right? And obviously, like, a messaging goes beyond you know, face-to-face discussions and, you know, consultation and support the system, right? Can you talk about, you know, what is the content of mental health messaging and how you disseminate that message across, you know, Cambodian society, which, you know, the DCCAN may be constrained from reaching, that, you know, for a variety of reasons, like a limited number of staff, resources to send them across the country, right? You've got 1,000 volunteers, but still, like, you know, 1,000 for you know, the 5 million survivors is it's quite an inadequate number, right?
yeah. Yes. So first, I also would like to let you know that we also have a TPO, Transcultural Psychosocial Organization, which is very active on mental health. But still, you know, like it is not enough in order to serve 5 million survivors and to really understand and fit the needs. So that's why it is very important to increase this effort in order to or to find other ways in order to address the issue. But I would like to, when we talk about mental health, the first thing is to really acknowledge the resilience of survivors that they have, you know, like, which means even though they suffered from all kinds of, you know, like, they face a lot of challenges or traumatic events during the Khmer Rouge time and even post Khmer Rouge, because multiple events also kind of took place, and that's why, but then they still stay strong in order to deal with this issue. So we need to highlight the resiliency whenever, you know, like we talk about mental health, in order to really motivate them to confront the issue. And then when we talk about mental health, we need to also understand people's mindset, because in Cambodia, usually people try to, sometimes when you raise that too much, it can be an issue rather than an effect, but adverse effect. Like, for example, sometimes people would marry this with psychology, what we call the abnormal, psychologically abnormal, you know. That's why we have to be very careful when we talk about mental health. So we also ask them what they know or what it means, mental health to them, you know, like, or ask them to tell us rather than to say what is mental health, but ask them, you know, to tell us what it is and what is their understanding about mental health. So usually they talk about nightmare. They talk about their sleep, that they cannot sleep well because of this nightmare, and it's also affect their heart oxygen, like their cardiovascular and their respiratory effects. It has that effect, and it also affect their appetite and digestive problems. So when they talk or express all these symptoms, manifest all these symptoms, so we kind of like talk to them and how to, because we have the team who kind of are specialized in this issue. And then so first we practice the meditation. So the meditation about 15 minutes, and then this is effective. I mean, even though it is in a short run, because like to ensure that they're gonna practice again or not. So that's why it's important to highlight in the brochure and practice quite often, at least once a day. So they talk about the effectiveness of that kind of practice or meditation. And that's why it's important to really continue to engage, to visit them. So we need to conduct multiple home visits to their community. And then in terms of resources, of course, we have volunteers, and we continue to recruit more volunteers in order to train them, in order for them to also kind of take care or talk or visit all these people. And we also have our team who are trained by the international experts in order, and then we also have many years of experience in this issue, and we will also train others in order to work on this. That's why we also work with a local private clinic and village doctor and Informal Survivor Association in order to build network and kind of share these resources to make sure that we create sufficient kind of resources, adequate resources to help a survivor to have better access to health care, both mental and physical health.
Thank you very much. That we've got maybe about 10 minutes before we wrap it up. I want to invite you to comment on a few international, dimensions. One is, as you know, the Khmer Rouge genocide, or the regime of Pol Pot, was overthrown in January 1979, right? So that's 1 year after our Burmese general Ne Win, the dictator, started our own genocidal policies towards Rohingya Muslims. And as you also know, as a DC Cam researcher, Ne Win was one of the very, very few heads of states that visited Pol Pot and the senior Khmer Rouge leadership in Siem Reap in the middle of the genocide that was going on, right? So Ne Win came back and then started his own genocide, against the Rohingya Muslims in Western Burma in 1978 February, and I think he visited Pol Pot regime in 1976 or 77, right? So these dictators and genocidal leaders, they learn from each other, right? Are there lessons that you think that the Burmese people and activists and educators should learn from your experience? Because Ne Win's long dead, but Myanmar is still undergoing a civil war and also a genocide. Similar to what happened to your Cambodian people. The ouster of Pol Pot regime in January 1979 did not bring peace to your country, but instead it was followed by the civil war, right? Khmer Rouge were allowed to regroup along the Thai-Cambodian border, and also Khmer Rouge enjoyed the political and diplomatic, as well as financial support from very powerful external powers such as United States, China, ASEAN countries. Yeah, the Khmer Rouge was ousted by the Vietnamese and the Hun Sen, patriotic group. But the Khmer Rouge continued to be seated at the United Nations for the next 10 or 12 years, right? And so what are the lessons that the Burmese people should learn from your experience, in terms of, obviously, you are extremely fortunate in that you reach a point where you can rebuild your society, and Myanmar is still undergoing decades of like a civil war inside the country. We don't have the opportunity to rebuild or to implement this kind of a very positive mental health program. But still, like there are lessons that Burmese should be learning from your post genocide, post civil war Cambodia.
Yes, if you talk about the context, like Cambodia, as you described earlier, since 1979, and then it was not the end of the Khmer Rouge at that time, still civil war, and until 1991, and still, even we had a Paris Peace Agreement, only until 1998, right? That the Khmer Rouge defected to the government, and in 2006 that we had the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. So 40 years, 4 decades, before we reached to this point. So, so we had gone through all of this, up and downs situation that until we had the tribunal, and then we were able to implement all these we call Transitional Justice initiative more fully, and so whatever happened, especially in Myanmar, so we follow that, and then it in some cases we could also draw some similarities, and also we could also see some kind of differences in a way of different contexts or periods, we can put that way. So that's why it is very important to learn or to share the experience or lesson learned, especially what we had gone through, and then what are the mistake, or what are the lesson learned. I won't say best practice yet, because it's still a lot of things to do, and so I would say this is just a start, and we need to make a lot of more effort in order to reach that goal. But at least we can, share this kind of experience, especially in terms of hope, I would say. So even though it has been 4 decades, but we still have that kind of hope, and then we continue to have that hope that justice, education, but also mental health or physical health care, and then there will be more something, some more initiative in terms of we call community development, because we are now in ASEAN, that we are still far behind. The other day we had in collaboration with the United Nations Office of Genocide Prevention to Protect, to organize a conference, a workshop, by bringing together Cambodian, Thai, and Vietnamese teachers together. We actually wanted to involve Burmese or Myanmar teachers from Myanmar, but we were not able to do so yet at this point. But we hope to do at a later date, and that's why in order to learn or to build the capacity of teachers and learn about the experience and atrocity or human rights violation, so that we can, not to incorporate into school curriculum immediately, but at least start with individual teachers, So to build their capacity and then have them play a bigger role, a crucial role in that. And so when he or she becomes a successful role model, then that can be a good, an effective way in order to see here, like this is something that we need to do in order to have our own curriculum, and then step by step we can also integrate that into national curriculum. So this is our soft approach, but we hope that this will be an effective way, and we can also engage other ASEAN countries, including Myanmar, in this process in the future.
Thank you very much. Just a final, the question in terms of what DC Cam Executive Director Yok Chan wrote. This is very relevant to Myanmar case, and also I suppose the relevant to the Bosnian case as well, because the formal judicial process of seeking justice has left, or processes have left both, Bosnian survivors of genocide and, Cambodian survivors of genocide, very much unsatisfied, right? In other words, sticking with the Cambodian tribunal, the tribunal was, set up in 2006 and started the operations in 2007, and it has essentially concluded its sessions, right? Just last year or this year. So in those the 16 or 15 years, the cost of running that tribunal was over $300 million US, and you had practically only the 3 people that were judicially punished, right? Khieu Sampong, Nong Che, and the S-21 chief Duke. Only 2 top leaders and 1 director of a torture chamber or center in Phnom Penh, $300 million US, and 15 years. It is, in a material term, very difficult to call it a success, right? But this is not even like Nuremberg Tribunal, right? The Nuremberg Tribunal, lasted less than a year. Then, quite a few number of senior Nazis were punished, right? So we have similar issues in Bosnia, the Yugoslavia Tribunal, as well as the ICC, against Milosevic and a few guys, right? And still, societies are left angry, supporting the judgment and opposing the judgment. In the case of Burma, we also have multiple international judicial processes, including universal jurisdiction case in Argentina, which is not likely to produce anything much. But we've got the International Court of Justice, Gambia versus Myanmar case going on, but that doesn't involve any individual wrongdoers, right? Because it's a legal dispute between 2 states. So what is your advice to the Burmese who may be looking at these formal judicial processes under the UN auspices, whereas in fact, the kind of restorative justice and the transitional justice that DC Cam and others in Cambodia are pursuing may be producing, a lot more positive outcome for the survivors as well as ex-perpetrators?
Yes, so when we talk about justice, it is very broad, and but of course, survivors or victims want justice. It doesn't, regardless of their nationality, religion, or gender. So because when we suffer mentally or physically, we want justice to be done. And it's better to have than nothing. You know, like this kind of concept or kind of hope or perspective is still there with Cambodian people, and I'm sure that with other people, regardless of their country or nationalities. So the same thing with Burmese people, that justice is very important for them. But just a matter of, like, the question is about when justice is done or is seen. But what I have followed so far, that a lot of effort also have been made, and also you are one of the kind of a pioneer in that area. And if we continue to do so, one day there will be justice or kind of judicial process that will take place in order to find justice for the victim. And so that's why what I can see and can also draw from our experience is to continue to collect information or documents in order to serve judicial process, but at the same time to serve the public, you know, like about to have this kind of, I would say, documentation center in whatever way or whatever form, but we need to have that kind of documents or the center in order to document the atrocity and to empower survivor, even though it's not, we don't have a court yet, but empower mean in order to encourage them to speak and then to maintain contact and visit them in order to make sure that they are not alone. You know, they have someone or group or people to take care or look after them, so that they are, it is a positive way in order for them to really confront. And the other thing is networking is very important, as you have done so far, that trying to learn from other country and draw a comparison, and then also, you know, speak out on those issues. And then this is a very important and powerful way in order to have message across. So it is important to raise the awareness, because sometimes, even though we are close to each other, but if we don't really talk and really raise the awareness, people still are not aware or are not engaged. So that's why it's important to make people aware and engage them in whatever way we can, and also engage the international community. Maybe it won't happen today, but you know, it can form a bulk of information or, you know, like documents for us to kind of digest, to kind of learn and then benefit from, and also do something in order to find justice for the victim.
Yeah, thank you, Farina. That's really helpful advice to the Burmese and others, because about 2 weeks ago, I was at the Srebrenica Memorial Center, and you know, one of the friends or colleagues there, who is the liaison officer and educator, she was saying that you know, although their memorial center, which is a former UN compound, you know, that occupied by the Dutch peacekeepers, they're still chasing the documents from ICTY, International, you know, Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, right? And they don't have the documentation, and so in your case, you're years ahead of either Burmese or Bosnians, because you own the documents, right? I mean, the Documentation Center Cambodia, you know, owns the documents, millions of them, and then allow others, like international researchers as well as lawyers in the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, to access and make use of them. In our case, we have the independent investigative mechanism set up with $36 million US, but that's not in the hands of the Burmese. That's in the hands of international lawyers, right? And so we would, I expect that we will be in a similar situation where, you know, the documentations about our own atrocities that we suffer will be owned by the United Nations and international lawyers instead of victims themselves. And so we're at a great advantage. And so the Burmese should start building our own processes of documenting, because obviously, like the Cambodians, we will find ourselves in a rather unsatisfied situation with the international judicial processes, because UN is not the end of the justice process. It has to be our own and our own societal initiative. And so you've been talking or listening to Farina, Principal Deputy Director of world-renowned Documentation Center of Cambodia. And I'm personally very grateful to Farina, and I learned so much. And thank you so much for giving me 1 hour to explain and share your reflections on your experience. Thank you so much, Farina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mongzani.
Have a good day. Yeah.